Hello, everyone. I'm Derek Haas. I'm here with Malcolm Spellman. Malcolm, it's nice to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you, and it's good to put a name with a face for the for the first time.
I've been knowing Derek probably 12 to 15. How long have I known you, Derek?
Since 2005.
And I see him regularly in person because he lives up the street from me.
Yeah, how did we meet?
Well, that is an interesting question.
That's a whole
Derek.
different story. That's a whole different story.
No, it's how we met, but how we got tight, or as we got tight, I felt like would be a fun thing for the interview. Because when I met you, well, when we first started, we met on a message board, and then we met in person. And I was way down on my luck. I was completely out of the business at that time. And you asked me, I didn't have no reps. You know what I'm saying? I had my lawyer because, you know, whatever. But you asked to read one of my scripts, and I sent you to Dying Ground.
Oh, yeah.
Which we ended up working on together for a little while. And more importantly, you got me back repped by introducing me to your managers. So I felt like, you know, that's always in my head a super important time. It's when it's like basically I went from flatline to a single beat. You know what I'm saying?
Awesome. Well, it's been incredible for me to watch you for the last 15 years, and then especially what happened in this last year. I mean, it started really with Empire and watching you just dominate network television. But then it all culminated in this year with a show you ran, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which we're going to talk about, and then your Hip Hop Uncovered documentary that you also appeared in, which was awesome. But wow, what a year. So I got a bunch of questions that I wrote down. Usually Malcolm and I just do this in our backyards while we talk, but now we get to share it with everyone. Okay, so I have this question that I've been wanting to ask you. What, as you were getting into, you're going to do the job, which is take on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier for Marvel, which is probably the mega of the mega producers right now. What was important for you to hear from them that made you say, okay, this is something that I feel like I can not only, you know, put my stamp on, but bring my vision to the screen?
In the initial thing, they were super open. So they're like everything I presented, particularly like getting into Bucky dealing with trauma in a way that dealt with amends and sort of steps, but more sketchy as far as I thought, dealing with a decidedly Black superhero and that point of view and what that meant for the Shield. Those were like the first things I lobbed out there to see if they had pushed back, because I knew we were going to go with a tone and tackle some subject matter that they hadn't really dealt with before. But the thing that I really felt supported by was, as the story, you know, as we developed this thing, there was, I know I'm allowed to talk about this now.
Yeah.
There was some back and forth about whether or not we could use Isaiah mm-hmm. Bradley. And for me, that character is the soul of the series and is the living embodiment of Sam's fears. And it would have fucked the whole thing up if we couldn't use him. And when I fought for him and Kevin was like, cool, I just felt like we were all one at that moment.
Awesome. Did you, what movies, you know how like when you go and you're pitching a job and you start, or pitching a season to them, what movies or shows did you reference that, because they're used to hearing, oh, we're going to do this like another superhero movie, but I bet you didn't do that. What did you reference?
It was the main two were Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours, and particularly because 48 Hours did such a good job that everybody remembers it as being more of a comedy than it was. And it went at race in a way that kind of how I wanted to go at race. So though we had printed up a bunch of pictures from it, put it up on the walls, because that was our bullseye, those two movies.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Because I remember even more so in 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and just getting in a full-on fist fight with Eddie Murphy. That wasn't about the plot. It was about the two of them finally getting it out.
And you felt like someone was getting hurt in that fist fight. You know what I'm saying? Like it was,
Yeah.
There was real acrimony in there. It was very, very grounded. You know what I'm saying? Nah, it's a great one, and it's a great bar for a two-hander.
Right, for sure. Well, the other thing I think anybody who watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier and thought they were just going to get a standard superhero movie or superhero series was pleasantly surprised, because the plot was super complex. And complexity is obviously important to you as you were plotting that out. Just explain a little bit of what you were going for with varying takes on who the antagonists and the protagonists were at any given moment.
We felt like to make that work, like that there's, I forget, so there's writers out there that make a distinction between antagonists and villains. And so I would say we had several antagonists in this. I don't know if we had a villain. And what we did to make that work so that it all felt like it was going together and building towards one thing is we did thorough breaks from each of those characters' points of view. We could the writers in that room could tell you every beat of this movie from Carly's point of view. They could tell you every beat of this series from Zemo's point of view. And we spent a lot of time with that, just rotating it through those lenses and just saying, what would they do now? What do they know what's going on? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that translated because there's definitely your different characters at different points of time thought they were the protagonist. Like Zemo thinks he's doing the right thing when he shoots people who had taken the serum, but that was consistent with what his character was through the whole thing. Awesome. I think that's a cool way to do it. It definitely makes for more appealing or interesting bad guys, I think.
Yeah, we to what you're saying, like we work very hard to, like, I think most people know that the best bad guys believe they're heroes, right?
Right.
And what we wanted to do with this one was say, how close can we get these bad guys to the audience feeling like they're heroes? Because then, you know what I'm saying, then you're really doing something. And, like I said, I feel, a lot of people, I'm not going to name the people, but there's folks I'm working with now, producers, with, I remember this woman who hit me up and was like, please don't, she sent me an email like episode 3 or 4, please don't turn Carly into a bad guy. Please redeem her. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, but your expectations on Carly and the Flag Smashers changed definitely from one episode to the next. And I do think that was the audience reaction, I think was an honest reaction of like, wait, what am I supposed to, you set her up to be a protagonist. What am I supposed to be feeling now?
Yep. Yeah, we worked hard on that. It was, like I said, it was, everyone was really patient and diligent about digging through this thing and rotating. Like, man, I'm very proud of what the group did
for sure
with this project, because like, even if you watch it and track Lamar, that character is consistent as fuck going all the way through. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of that is the writers who, once they know what you're trying to do, will be like, hey, dude, I was looking at this scene here, and we have Lamar being this character and representing this point of view. It feels like we're off in this scene, and it might be one line of dialogue.
Right. Man, people don't understand a lot of times what the showrunner has to do, because they think showrunner, okay, sometimes they have to deal with actors, sometimes they have to create stories, but you're also just in charge of every character's point of view and mouth and the whole episode's point of view from the whole, and people are constantly trying to erode that. So you got to be tough throughout the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and you got to constantly reconvey it to your team, and not only convey it to them, like you need to. You're not telling these people what to do. You're telling them, can we get in the same brain together so that when you guys run off, it's not violating what anyone's thinking of? And that shit is arduous. You got to constantly be communicating, even shit that you feel like everyone understands. You are repeating why the characters are behaving this way so that they can be like, okay, got it, and not run off. Because, you know, when you got a room full of creative people, they're going to have their, oh man, these are opinionated people.
Yeah.
The showrunner is not a tyrant. And if you let these people, they'll be like, fuck, I'll write this show for you. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I've definitely relied on the line sometimes of like, I hear you, but I trust my taste at this point. And I know you've gotten, you don't shy away from flexing when you have to on in a room. I know that.
Yeah, nah, I'm forceful, but again, I'm very, very open. Like,
sure,
what you're talking about, I think it's worthwhile, since we got writers, is you're being considerate when you're putting the smackdown with that line. Like, I hear you, but I got to trust my taste, means this. What you're communicating to the writer is, don't take this personal. I'm not even saying your take is wrong. We just got to roll my way to keep it consistent and keep it going. And that allows that writer to stay inspired and not feel, you know what I'm saying, undercut.
Yep. And then the other thing that happens inevitably is you've got 8 episodes or 22 episodes. Well, you can plan it out how it's going to go. And then when it starts going, it doesn't always.
Nope.
So you have to also be flexible and keep your your vision intact. Yeah. Did you have any particularly standout things that happened as it went along that you were like, "Ooh, I gotta adjust"?
Yeah, there was, you like you said, there's no way around that shit if you're being real and not draconian and stuck in your ways. Better things are gonna emerge, and they're gonna create ripples and problems that are gonna require a lot of work to fix and make the whole thing better. So there was a ton of that. And then there was shit where, like, we'd early on in the project gone to way too dark of a place. You know what I'm saying? And when we pulled it back, if you've done your job right, any changes are gonna have big ripples, because everything's connected. Like, it's not just a tonal thing, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that shit was grueling. It was a grueling process. Like, we worked, I mean, I guess I can say this, at one point we was coming in the writer's room 6 days a week.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
yep.
You do remember. Yeah.
Okay, this is me trying to write down questions that I wanted to ask you. So anybody who watched the show realizes you had a lot to say about government, and you had a lot to say particularly about the use of symbols. And I think of, obviously the shield's a symbol. I mean, just a shield in and of itself is a symbol, but then you put a red, white, and blue and a white star on it, and it's an even bigger symbol. So, and the name Flag Smashers, that's a symbol, right? Yep. So what do you think what would you say you accomplished in your use of symbols throughout this series?
I think, dude, again, it's going to be a shitty answer if I do the false humility thing. So I'm going to talk.
Do the real.
And if I look like an asshole, I'm sorry. I know everybody in the audience thinks they're amazing also. So that's not unique.
We're talking to writers.
I feel like what we did well was, through the symbolism, harness the conversations that are happening in this country right now and gave ourselves a way to dramatize them with authority and authoritarianism coming through John Walker, through, you know, everything from what was happening with these movements that are pushing against the system right now with the flag smashers, but also to just genuinely disempower people, whatever, right? And this is what people are talking about at home. And through symbolism and the people who don it and honor it and say, this is what my character is, that conversation goes from two people just talking all the time to having a fight about what, you know what I'm saying? And or sometimes more sophisticated. So I feel like, man, the symbolism allowed us to embody what's relevant right now and play it out in a dramatic way. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and you know, when you think about when you had to write this and when you were making it, and then where the world went, it feels like you were ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff. What was that like, knowing that, you know, the reception was going to be, you know, different than probably when you first started writing it, but you predicted a lot of what was going to happen.
I'm super proud of that. And you know, I didn't expect this question, but I'm glad you're interviewing me, because I think people think I'm being full of shit when I say we were dialed in on this. We didn't go back and rewrite. The discussions me and entire writer's room had about where this country was going and how people on all sides were feeling. And I'm gonna be real, we damn near had scenes in this thing with the Capitol attack before that, you know, 6 months before that happened. We were dialed in, and it's important to have diverse voices in the room, because then your conversation about reality and the state of being and what people want can lead you and give you that foresight. And none of that shit is a fluke. We were even like the stuff where we was like the pandemic, we did do some tweaking once the pandemic hit, but honestly, we always meant to use the blip, which is Thanos disappearing half the population, and then when he dies, bringing them back, to create a global crisis. And the reason we did that is I felt like right now there's a global sentiment of powerlessness and stress. And so that worked that way. So when the pandemic came, we was already, you know what I'm saying? The pandemic is just the embodiment of how people was feeling anyway.
Yeah, awesome. When you were writing or crafting the series, there's one particular ending to an episode that I think was so shocking and you know, almost like hard to watch, which was you had Captain America at that time being blonde haired and blue eyed, and his friend was shot and killed, and he chases unarmed, you know, refugee out to Freedom Square, so to speak, in a, you know, in a foreign country, and then smashes his shield down into the face of an unarmed person. Woo! That was bold. What was the discussion like in the writers' room? And
I gotta admit, Kari, the director, we knew we wanted we knew we needed from the beginning that moment.
Yeah.
And how it was going to manifest changed a million times, but we knew it had to be difficult and painful. And we knew we wanted to make sure it wasn't like, oh, you're demonizing John Walker.
Yeah.
Lamar died. You know what I'm saying? So you
this understand. This is complex. That's what I'm talking about.
It is complex, just like so many conversations. And so when we landed on that, I got to admit, I didn't think they were going to let us keep it with the way Kari shot it. I didn't think they was going to let us keep it like that. And I'm glad they did, man, because people was responding to it. Yeah,
it was a gut punch in a lot of ways. But what I loved about it too was just the complexity. Like, we didn't know how we were. It's the same way I was talking about with John Walker. He thinks he's the good guy through most of the show. Really, up until the end, he thinks he's the good guy. He did everything right. I think he says, you know, he has that little speech that he makes that I'm going to get wrong. But speaking of speeches, you had this from, you wrote this. I feel it, the stares, the judgment. and there's nothing I can do to change it. No super serum, no blonde hair or blue eyes. The only power I have is that I believe we can do better. That was awesome, you know. My question is though, you know, that's what's unique about Captain America too. In this version, he's not super, he has no extra super powers, right? He's just a guy with the shield that he's got to train himself how to use. So, you know, the only power I have is that I believe we can do better. That's not really the only power he has though, right? He's got, now he's got the symbol. So just tell me a little bit about what you were trying to say with that.
Well, it is because, you know, he's mentioning, and man, we've tried to walk a tightrope on making it be honest from the character's point of view, understanding that he is Black. At the same time, he is aware that he has to represent everybody. So when you're mentioning blonde hair and blue eyes, you got to acknowledge the privilege and power that comes with that. At the same time, that isn't everything to him. And when he's carrying that shield, to me, what we were trying to get to is there is all those, so many people, immigrants, people of color, marginalized people, push because they see evidence that we can be amazing, right? This country. That's why they push, whether you're Black, brown, LGBT, Muslim, you know, Hindu, whatever, everyone can point to moments where they're like, fuck, if I push, there are these moments where I see the community of this country, you know what I'm saying, go better. So I think what we were so careful of in the wording of this speech was not to make Sam overly optimistic, yet acknowledge that this is what drives particularly Black folk when we go off to these wars and fight, is the inches that you can gain, if that makes sense. So that was part of his point of view. And then the other thing was, you know, establishing a new Captain America, who I would say, more than the shield being a superpower for him, the real symbol for him is that Black skin. Because if the world is everybody, including white folks, are feeling marginalized, who are you gonna have a better shorthand with than a Black person who steps up? You already know that motherfucker can identify with whatever your struggle is in the best case scenarios.
Right. Yeah, he says too, which you wrote, we need new heroes, ones suited for the times we're in. And I feel like, again, written before you know, the events of last year, and boy, did you nail, you know, that. It feels like all the world's looking for new symbols and new heroes. So that's kind of cool. You're on the forefront of that.
Yeah, and the country, I mean, the world, it's no denying the prominence of this country. You can't do it. It is just factually, if nothing else, economically, it's such a fucking global powerhouse that people were looking to us. And it's not political to say that. It's blind to think that people were not looking to this country. My mom is French, so I hear about that shit coming from out there, right? And so that's what that conversation is about, is like, you know, they're talking about themselves and heroes and Steve and all that, but it worked perfectly. This goes to your thing about symbolism, which is even the characters in this story and the comics are symbols of what the world was looking for right now.
Sure.
You know, it was a state of crisis, man.
But that's what's cool about Marvel, is they seem to be growing, as opposed to, we're going to take our old properties and we're going to say we have to stick to, you know, thoughts and feelings that were at the time. Instead, it feels like they're trying to advance themselves and the conversation. And so that's why they look to people like you.
Yep. They've pushed in all the chips on that. Like I said, I wish I could talk about what their upcoming slate is, but man, they're way ahead of all the other big brands, all of them. Like, I don't want to name them, but you know who they are.
Yeah.
They're way ahead of them, bro. They're
Well,
way
also,
ahead
like,
of
you
them.
just look at their output from this year with WandaVision, very different tone, look, feel, everything, to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, very different, to what's going on Loki right now.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, they're just, it's not a money grab. It's like how can we do, we're not doing it unless we do something different. So,
Yeah,
and
it truly isn't. And again, it's fucked because people really assume the worst when you think about brands that are this big. I can't speak on the other ones, right?
right.
But it's not a money grab. That it's just not. It is all very small personal decisions, starting with Kevin, then going through Nate, Lou, and Victoria and
Yeah.
all them about what is interesting and what they think they could do a great job with.
Yeah, but there's a big misperception. I read some article a while back that was kind of like, we're Marvel and we don't have showrunners. We just do. I mean, this was the tone of the article, not what the people at Marvel were saying. And I'm like, oh, then you didn't see Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because that's Malcolm. There's no that's no like, oh, we're just going to do a corporate version of this. They went and hired a showrunner that would give them a vision.
I agree. It's not, and you're right that I hear it a lot from people. No, the people who've made the decision that I'm a type robot, and I just showed up and did what they told me to do. They plugged a battery in my back. It's nothing I can do to convince them. But that, again, I'm really glad you agreed to do this interview. If you know me, you know what I did. You know what I'm saying? You see my fingerprints on that thing.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I can't even imagine what that project would have been in somebody else's hands, because it wouldn't have been that, and it wouldn't have had that much to say. Um, Getting back into it a little bit, Sam's sister, played an important part in the show, adding to the complexity, I would say. He thought he could go in and just assert his will right on her, and then he got another thing coming, and she made him look in the mirror. And I just expand on what you were thinking with the sister subplot.
We were, again, mythically, she's really the final boss.
Yeah.
Right? That's the final thing he has to get past, because he's confronted Isaiah, and we were super mindful to make sure that Isaiah, who is the living embodiment of Sam's fears, is never wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes his journey more difficult, because by the end of the story, he knows Isaiah is as right as anyone else, and that's what he's up against. And Sam's sister embodies sort of the personal doubt that he had, and whether or not him going off to be a hero was him being scared to take on, like, just so much stuff got removed because there just wasn't space. It would have been a 30 episode show. But we've done all this research on the Black fishermen in Louisiana and what the banks did to them. You know what I'm saying?
Cool.
And that fight at home, Sam always doubted himself. Did I run off and risk my life to avoid having to confront that? And by making her super opinionated and making her have all that agency, she's a giant in his life, because she embodies all that history. And it's not until he has that moment with her that he can go then put on the costume and become Cap.
Yep. The other kudos I'll give to you is, you watch some of these shows and you're like, you think you got it pegged. Okay, that's a drama. That's that's a comedy. But in any hour of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you had to be able to write drama, comedy, suspense, romance, or at least sexual tension, I will say, thriller, action. Like, you had to hit every genre and have a message and say something. And I don't think people who question your would you call yourself a typing robot? No,
Yeah.
that was super complex.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, we have this audience of writers. So I was gonna say, so you had a staff for this. What do you look for when you're hiring a staff writer? I know this is a little off the awards kind of talk, but what do you look for when you're hiring a staff writer or an assistant that you think eventually, could make it up to staff?
That's a really good question. So it depends on the role, right? Writer's assistant for us and the way we work and the way I break story is probably as important a job as show running. You know what I'm saying? And anyone who's a writer assistant for me, and there isn't many, you're gonna come with us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't even fucking care if you can write. You're gonna be doing so much work and managing the show in totality so much. And that attribute isn't always in line with talent, meaning there are immensely talented people that can't do that job. So just the ability to do that job. Now, if it's a personal assistant or company assistant for us, which is still a very intimate role, then if you're a great writer and you're someone who we think has a vision for themselves and can contribute, you can go that way. So writer's assistant, very specific, can you even handle that job? And then the other assistant roles are, do you A, really seem committed enough and talented enough to have that promise? And B, this is one you know about, right, B? Are you someone that's going to be destructive? Are you so self-involved? Are you so worried about your Instagram feed? Are you so worried about, what's the language I want to use? Can you roll? Can you get in a room full of writers or be around creative people and allow them to have differing opinions without us thinking you're going to burn us down, you know what I'm saying, on the internet?
Right.
Because it's a diverse group here. And at our company, the 51, there's LGBT, there's Black, there's white, there's, you know what I'm saying, there's men, women, older folks, younger, and we can't have someone that's precious and thinks their worldview is the only worldview.
Right. And yeah, you can see that complexity in your scripts as well, because I think everything's better when you've got multiple points of view rather than everybody in lockstep on whatever is the current, thinking. Cool. What have I not covered that we'll get to questions here in just a minute. But I definitely want to make sure I'm giving you, the proper
awards,
microphone.
the awards push.
Well, you deserve them. First of all,
it's like I said, if I could say one thing and then let's jump on to questions. There is a massive 99% benefit to the Marvel brand because it's arguably the most powerful platform in the world.
Right.
The 1% downside is the stigma with people who associate quality or whatever, right? And with it can't be a certain thing. Yeah. And I'm very, very proud of what we came together and did, the conversations that have come out of this show, me Zooming with people who are playing it for their students in schools, like with little kids or whatever. And, it is, I do think it's a special project, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's a cultural phenomenon. And I hope people can allow Marvel to be a part of that too, because they are part of the conversation. And so do our peers see it?
That's the thing that's amazing is it worked on the extra level of, I didn't even think about this, but yeah, it's also a kid's show, even with all of this complex stuff. And the other thing, you don't skimp on the action. You don't write action scene goes here. You've got thought put into, and that's I know you as a guy who grew up loving action movies, not looking down your nose at action movies.
Yeah, we wrote, like, one thing I learned really quickly. So here's the thing I learned in the process, right? When I break a big set piece, I usually look for what extra dimensions are playing out in it. Does the character come into the set piece one way, leave another way? Is the story fundamentally changed? Is there something I can introduce to it beyond what's happening in it that adds that layer, right? Right. And I watched these Kung Fu movies, this is years ago. Yeah. I learned like they definitely sectionalize and structure their set pieces to tell a story on top of that. And we were doing that. And I remember one of the set pieces, I won't mention which one, came back better as far as some of the action I'd written that I imagined, but some of the layers were not in there. So what we started doing with all the action was writing an accompanied story document for what the set piece is. In the first segment of the set piece, here's where the characters are at. This is what and we need a hero moment with, you know what I'm saying? And man, once those guys at Marvel got that shit,
yeah,
it was next level. You know what I'm saying? It was just fucking great.
That's great. Because again, this is that misconception that you're talking about, as though it's like that there's a degree of difficulty more in writing a drama than there is in writing an action sequence, when truly action sequences, when you care about them and when they have the mass appeal, it's because they're they have more layers. And it shouldn't ever just be point A to point B, what happens. It's there's 9 things going on in some of these scenes.
You're not just throwing a bucket list of cool shit. That shit, well, put it this way. Whenever you're watching an action movie and you're getting bored with the action, it's because they didn't do that extra work. Right. But in general, man, people are trying to really, everybody who attacks it, whether it's a comedy, a fucking fancy drama, or a superhero movie, people are showing up trying their deepest talent and respect for the characters and storytelling in every part of it, including the action.
Right. Awesome. Well, let me just check my phone here to see what questions we have from the audience. Give me one second. I have to put my glasses up because I can't read up close.
I'm looking at the Q&A thing. There's too many questions for me to pick from.
All right. Well, I got some highlighting ones. This is from Orlando. All right. In writing the show, what was the story problem that took you the longest to solve, and how did you solve it? That's a good one.
I will say I really struggled with the Power Broker run.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the fucking writer's room. Like, it was one of the rare instances, you never want to just say, guys, this storyline isn't working for me, right? But that was all I could offer.
Yeah.
And they just kept coming back, finding ways to connect it and make it work. And at some point I was like, fuck, I think you guys did it. You know what I'm saying?
But it's funny because the audience still doesn't believe you. They're like, you told them who the power broker was, and they're like, I still don't think that's it. I still think
it's great. It's great.
Awesome. Okay. Good question, Orlando. All right, this is from Jack. For your writer's room, do you pick the writers like a sports team with different writers who have certain skills, or do you seek a certain overall type of writer?
It varies from show to show, right? So when you're building a writer's room, especially for an ongoing series that's more episodes than we had, you do need people that can handle going into deep waters and multiple seasons, and that can just help you on a producing level alleviate some pressure, right?
Yeah.
On something like this, what I was looking for specific voices that were going to come at me from different angles that I never thought of, because I knew me and my guy, I won't mention his name because that'll be favoritism, but there were people there who work with me all the time on the show. I knew we could handle for 6 episodes any heavy lifting. And so I just needed true diversity and thinkers that was way out the box.
Yeah. It's funny, on our show, we always say, you got to do it all. Like, there's no, because you'll hear that a lot. They're excellent in the room. They're excellent on the page. I'm like, no, I need in the room and on the page. That's what we need.
Something like this, that's 6 episodes. If someone's genius in the room, and not that it happened, everybody in every arena, but you can't afford to take them shots for something like this.
That makes sense. Okay, this is from, I don't want to mispronounce a name, but I'm gonna try. It's spelled Chiniqua, Chiniqua, maybe. Apologies if I mispronounce it. You mentioned in a my last name's Haas, by the way. Everyone mispronounces that. So anyway, you mentioned in a past interview, the dynamic of the Bucky and Sarah took up a lot of hours in the writing realm. Could you share some of the aspects that went into the process on Bucky and Sarah?
It's really nice to see how much people started shipping Bucky and Sarah, because initially we broke a whole love story with them. There was a scene where Bucky knocks on the door and Sam's not there in Louisiana, right? And she answers and she looks at him and smiles, and he says, "I'm Bucky," and he said, you know, she's like, "I know who you are," and he's like, "It's the middle." Anyway, so we broke the entire love story. And then again, there's just no way, like, unless you're gonna mangle the actual stories to force Bucky to be in Louisiana enough to make that happen, it just wasn't working. But I think people felt it in the little bit of space that we had.
Yeah. Did you have a section in your board that was just like, how can we use Bucky's arm?
No, but can I tell you something? I don't know if people are getting it. You know what I'm super proud of, bro? The truck on fire.
Yeah.
And Bucky using his metal arm.
Yeah.
I'm really proud. Like, it's hard to think of.
This is what I'm saying.
Because Bucky's other arm is also super powerful.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard to think of like moments where you're like, you know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm talking about. This is not, people don't understand. This is like, you have to do the tightrope at the, you know, on top of the building, not down on ground level to write these things. Okay. Good questions. All right. This one's from Tony. What's the next frontier in storytelling for you? Oh, I want to know this too. Do you have a personal vision of what's next to elevate the human condition as a storyteller?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say what it is.
Okay.
But we're working on a project right now. The next one will be basically a limited series that is a specific story on policing and how the modern police force got built.
Ooh, awesome. I think you're gonna have a lot to say about that.
It's the shit that the true story, it's lunacy. It is.
Is that like a limited series? Like what? Yeah. Cool. Will you have a writer's room for that, or is that just gonna be?
I think we will have a room. I already know who I think we're gonna use for it. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, we'll have a room for that.
Cool. All right, this one is from Kate. How did you balance the action superhero elements with developing the relationship and intimacy between all the characters? Do you start, so when you're breaking an episode, I mean, you can answer that how you want, but as part of that question, or put some shape on it, do you start thinking about set pieces and then what the plot is and then character, or do you start character and then go the other way?
So I'm gonna give you a term. I'm not gonna mention the writer's name because he yelled at me when I mentioned him in another podcast, but he's a friend of ours, right?
Oh, then I'll mention him.
And he gave me this term, outside in writing versus inside out writing. And one is not better than the other. And all writers are a combination of both. But you usually lean one way or another. And one of the things that I loved about working on Empire is a lot of that storytelling was outside in. And I had to learn that I'm very, very inside out. Anyone who's worked with me in a room knows not only am I going to start with character, I pitch through from the beginning. Every day we're pitching through everything and repeating everything. And before we broke anything, like, of course, if someone has great ideas for a set piece that have elements to them that are special, you're going to jot those down and put them to the side. But before we do anything with plot, we're charting out these individual character stories and these character relationships, you know what I'm saying? So that everything can then be made to mean something. So I lean heavily on that shit. And that's just because a great set piece is going to show, is John Walker about to fixate on killing Carly? or is his inner hero gonna rise? All that is character anyway. You know what I'm saying? So if you have that, you can then wield it in the set piece.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times, I heard the expression when you're pitching, like, don't just pitch. Well, like you can have two pitches when you're pitching to a network or a studio or a department head or whatever. And it's like, I'm going to give you the plot, but then I'm going to tell you the emotional plot. And it feels like that's how you guys chart these guys.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let me see what other questions we have here. Shout out to Enid for feeding me these questions, doing a great job. All right, this is from Megan. How did you decide what other characters from the Marvel universe to include? Also, thanks for bringing the Dora
Milaje.
That's what I meant.
Yes. It's two things happen, right? The first thing that happens when you work at Marvel is you get smacked around as far as they already know you're going to do this. I'm not going to lie. I showed up. I wanted to use a lot of characters. And they're like, dude, you can't just put motherfuckers you like in your, you know what I'm saying? Because you turn into a little kid when you had that play box, right?
Oh, that's funny.
Spider-Man is not just going to be in here because you like him. You know what I'm saying? So first you get over that. And then you start to pick characters that make this story interesting and create conflict and that would viably appear in here. You know what I'm saying? That's why I was able to win the debate over Isaiah, is because ultimately they knew it was right. Like they knew it belonged.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the reason for not wanting Isaiah wasn't anything more than he was such an amazing character. Couldn't we do a big giant role with him? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, that felt like you were, hearkening to the Tuskegee Airmen and that whole vibe. Was that, I mean, obviously that's what you were going for, but talk about that just for a minute.
Well, we had to change the character a little bit from the books because Isaiah is a vegetable in the comics, you know what I'm saying? And he can't speak. And it's very, very tragic. Yes, the Tuskegee experiment is the foundation for it. And so that's all the discussion because, Marvel's respectful of the books, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
And if you're going to change the characters, which you often have to do, you have to have a good reason. And Kevin and the other people got to believe that it's going to neutrify, if that's a word, the broader MCU. Like if you're going to change these characters and bring them out, it's gonna feed and fertilize the bigger universe.
Yeah, love it. From Brooke. Oh, hold on. From Brooke, I'm curious about your research process for Bucky's journey through grief, guilt, and trauma. Did you bring in a grief specialist?
Yeah, not only do you talk to grief specialists, you bring in you go out and research from your own life, you know what I'm saying? Things that you dealt with, and I'll call somebody like, I'm sober, right? Yeah. And we knew there's an amends storyline there. And so, you call up people that that are in the program and had them you tell them what the story is and how to not only be responsible, but how to make it feel like by hearing someone's personal testimony and any given topic, that's going to give you emotion that makes it mean something. So yes, and everybody ran out and did their own thing. Like they researched the books, they researched the movies, and then you go into real life and do that research and come into the room, you know what I'm saying, and say, this is what I found.
Yeah, it's so funny.
It's a lot of work. This shit is a lot more work than people think it is.
And it's so basic, and everybody's heard it since they were taking their first writing class, which is write what you know. And it cracks me up that people still, in my mind, get that wrong or think it's so literal that it means, if you grew up in the suburbs, you should write about the suburbs. Are you still there, Malcolm, or did you?
I'm listening.
Oh, okay.
That's fucked up, Derek.
No, I thought you were like frozen. I was just worried.
I was looking at my pup.
No, I thought you were frozen. But that idea that you held it so still, it threw me off.
It's all good. I'm not mad. I'm coming over for pot pie, so don't worry. We're good.
But the idea that write what you know is, okay, you're working on this project, a Marvel movie or Empire, or even your documentary. And guess what? You're going to write from your own experience is going to end up in all of these different characters.
Yeah, it is. You start off as a baby writer, you definitely are going to write what you know, your immediate experience, it's your friends or whatever, right? But as you start to analyze your life, you're able to start to apply that shit to, it could be fucking aliens or a political thriller, and you're from the farmlands in Iowa, you know what I'm saying? And you're going to find a way to respect the new world that you've investigated with your own personal experience, which makes it mean something in your own point of view. Man, if you ain't got a point of view on what you're writing, it's gonna feel generic as fuck anyway, and you're gonna have to rely. So yeah, write what you know starts to spread out and get bigger.
I couldn't agree more. You know how we're always solving Hollywood's problems? That's one of our things.
Yes.
What would you like to see solved in the next few years?
This is my big thing, and I'm reaching out to someone to write about it, is I'm seeing the ugly reemergence, and I'm saying I'm seeing this directly, right? This conversation of international, and that people of color, and in my case, specifically Black people, limit the appeal of a given project internationally.
Oh, yeah.
Is becoming more and more prevalent in TV. And the people who are saying it are hiding behind other things, but they're still saying it. And as long as we let these people believe that and use their fake stats and deny the real stats, what that does is, if you don't solve that problem, then what you're basically saying is Black folk and people of marginalized people are less valuable than white people, which is basically what they're saying overall. And that means if they're less valuable, their projects need to be less resourced because they have less appeal, and we might as well do less of them. And it don't fucking matter who you hire, because a person who is less valuable probably shouldn't be in the room of Lord of the Rings, because you want that to reach as many people as possible. And you've created this myth about the value of white people versus everyone else. And I'm telling you, Derek, it is rampant, and they really fucking believe it. They really believe that white folk who make up 20% of the global population, the rest of the world really just wants to see them. Yeah, there's outlet, and it's a very dangerous thing. And I'm hearing it more and more. And one of my homeboys, I'll tell you about it tonight, just dealt with it on his shit getting passed on.
Oh my
God.
And
when I tell it to you, you're gonna be like, oh fuck. Of course, what else could it be? When I tell you what this project is,
yeah,
you're gonna be like, yeah, they did it because the lead is Black.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yikes. Cool. Glad I asked that one.
Yep.
Okay, from Jonathan. And I apologize if I don't get to all the questions. We only have like a few more minutes here. This is the farthest Marvel has gone into the intersection of race and superheroism. How did you personally navigate having those conversations with Marvel? Any advice you can give other people of color who find themselves lucky enough to be in your shoes?
So I'm very, 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 very direct and open and honest. And I also am very willing to not do a given job. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be willing to walk. That said, the flip side of this, and this is where I feel like people should be careful, is you don't want to walk into rooms and terrorize people and put them on defense and scare them out of the project, because then you don't get to put that shit forward. People a lot of times need to be educated and talked to, not talked at. That don't mean at any moment are you compromising who you are or what you think is right. But if someone disagrees with you and they're scared of you, the way Hollywood works is they're not gonna say that shit to your face. They're just gonna be like this, you know, let's just not do this project. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
they won't even do that. They'll wait till you're out of the room.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is scary. I don't want to do it. And then you didn't do nothing for anybody.
Right.
So you gotta balance a tightrope act of being very, very honest, but being open to the fact that someone may initially disagree with you. Maybe they're right, or if they're wrong, can you make them understand your point of view as opposed to yelling at them or bullying them or pushing them into a place where they shut down? Because me and you know, Derek, because we talk to these people, hella fucking projects that could be amazing and could be diverse and deal with marginalized people don't happen because ultimately, until shit changes, white people, particularly white dudes, are who are at the top of any given food chain. And if they're scared, they're just going to quietly disappear and let the project fade off and die.
Yeah, I think anybody who's met you knows that you don't pull any punches. But I don't think anybody who knows you also doesn't think, oh, this guy is a jerk.
Right.
You know, it's so you get between those two and then you just keep it honest it feels like you are always keeping it honest. Okay, I think Malcolm, that's all the questions that I got on here. We only have 3 minutes left. So I just want to say, awesome to see you on here. Someday we'll get to meet in person. Just kidding. We hang out 3 times a week. We try to solve Hollywood's problems, but we don't always succeed. Any last words that you want to throw in here? You're talking to all these writers who, you know, love movies and love TV shows. Give them an inspiring ending here.
It is an amazing time right now to be in television, not movies. And almost anything is possible. There's still a lot of hurdles and a lot of bias and blind spots that you have to overcome. But this is a very, very, very special time. Yeah. And I never seen nothing like it. And if you can dial in on why your life is specific and unique, and more importantly, your point of view, almost anybody with talent right now has a shot at telling their story. Yeah. We talked about this a lot, but we really are in the golden age of television, and not to be writer biased, but that's got to be because writers are in charge. Yeah, or is that changing? But let's don't get into that on a double. Oh, that's a topic for another day. Yeah, that's a topic for another day. We like writers being in charge. I feel like we do. It's been good. And listen, there's no doubt about it. It is the single most obvious thing that has allowed TV to have this giant run where it never really falls off, even as it evolves. And you know what it's coming from. It's us, it's writers. Us. Not that directors and actors aren't amazing. They are. We love working with them. Malcolm, last 30 seconds. What is your favorite episode of Chicago Fire? All of them. Oh, okay, great. Awesome. That's how we'll end it. Thank you guys. The other night. It's on a marathon in Palm Springs. Hey, I know Nichelle likes it. I watched it. All right, you guys, later. All right, great to see you guys.